Hi, Lindsay. Thank you so much for coming to our show. I really, really appreciate it. I know you have a busy schedule or taking the time out for me and my audience. I really appreciate it. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, doing much better today. So yeah,
Good.
super excited for this episode and learn from you and your journey. So obviously you are a life coach and we talked about before a little bit about yourself, but obviously my audience doesn't know about more about yourself. So can you just tell us like who you are, what do you actually do, and how you go into the life coaching?
Of course, yes. So thank you for the opportunity for coming to speak in the first
You're
place.
welcome.
I'm Lindsay. I am, as you said, a life and executive coach. And I specialise in working with women who are struggling with the imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
And the imposter syndrome, we'll go into a bit more detail later, but it is that feeling of being a fraud, of not being good enough, regardless of the evidence to the contrary as to why you are totally okay to be in the position that you are in. I got to this position myself because I had a corporate career for 17 years in financial services.
Wow.
Absolutely loved everything I did there, but
Yeah.
kind of moved around career-wise. And I took voluntary redundancy, and that's when I trained to become a life coach. And as part of that training, you do a lot of personal development and self-analysis. And I noticed that I actually had a behavioural pattern when I was in the financial services industry where I would go for promotions, I would go for opportunities and new projects. And then once I'd achieved them, sort of 3 to 6 months into that, I would have this huge crisis of confidence where I started to question whether I could actually do the job anymore. And that just kind of escalated. So I then catastrophized the situation that I was going to get fired, that I was never going to find a job at that level again. And I would have sleepless nights worrying about the next day. I just kind of got myself into this anxiety and worry cycle. And then after those sort of 3 to 6 months, my confidence started to come back as my competence grew within that role. And then I'd find that cycle repeated every couple of years when I took on the next promotion or the next project. And with that research is how I found that what I've just described is called the imposter syndrome. And that's kind of how I then specialise within that, within my career.
Wow, that's really interesting. So you found the problem on yourself and you chose to work with other women, like going through that similar situation. So so how long you've been helping women with going over the same problem they're having, and how long you've been a life coach for?
Yes, so I qualified as a life coach in 2012. Then kind of, I suppose if I'm honest, had it as a bit of a hobby business for a few years. And then it was sort of 2017, 2018 that I took this to what I considered the next level and really started seeing private clients within my practice.
Yeah, that's really great. So overall, like we can say about 8-9 years you've been actually practicing that, then you become like a full-time last 3 years. Yeah, so it's a great way. So what do you actually work with? Is it like a corporate woman who's going over the ladder, or like a staying home mom? So who is the ideal clients at the moment?
Yeah, so it really does vary. It tends to be more on the career side of things that these things arise. Though I specialise in working with women, I do work with men as well, because up to 70% of us will struggle with this at some point in our lives. It isn't just about females, it's just, I think with my experience and background, that's kind of where I naturally saw my base was coming from. And from a marketing point of view, we're always told to niche and to kind of get your message out there to a particular audience. So yeah, it tends to be more on the corporate career side of things. It may also be somebody who's self-employed or business owners, because it's very lonely when you're starting out. That fear and self-doubt can really come in. It can also be women that are returning to work, maybe from maternity leave or from some kind of absence, because what you may find is they have this, because their life is very different now. They've got to be a mum and they've got to still be a worker and still be efficient. What they often find is they feel that they're not doing a very good job in either camp. And it's not the truth, but it's how they're feeling about the situation. And then they can really feel like they're both being a fraud at being a good mum and a fraud at being a good worker. So it's kind of working through and seeing how we can align the fact that they are doing a good job and that knowing to that feeling of actually inside feeling that they're doing a good job.
So you basically working with both men and women, so especially with a woman with going through the same situation you was going through. So when was the actual moment you realized I need to make some changes on myself? So what was the light bulb went off?
So I think for me, there wasn't necessarily this big epiphany. I know some people have the great, hero journey story. I think for me, I'd always been interested in psychology, but knew I didn't want to be working. I explored the counselling route a few times and knew that wasn't for me. Really enjoyed all my careers within the bank, but always also knew that I hadn't found the career, as it were, that one that really lit me up. And I then had an opportunity. I live in Southampton. They were offering a free 2-day course, the Coaching Academy. And so I kind of went along, didn't really know anything about coaching, saw it as an opportunity. That was my light bulb moment, sitting in that room and going, this is what I've been looking for, because it incorporates psychology, how our minds work, but it's forward focused. It's very much, where are you now? Where do you want to get to? And how do we get you there? And all the reasons I hadn't wanted necessarily to do psychology or counselling was because it's focused in the past and overcoming those things. And it's definitely got its place, but it just wasn't for me. That kind of, that sitting in that classroom, I was like, this is what I need to be doing. And then that's kind of the catalyst to the changes that I made.
Yeah, it's a great change, figuring out when you need to make changes, and knowing yourself is most important thing. So I'm going to go to the topic right now. So the topic it shows, which you coach on and you specialize on, imposter syndrome. So those who our listener doesn't know about it, can you explain to them what actually imposter syndrome is and how is it affecting our life and career?
Of course. So it's something that has been around for a long time. So it was originally, or the phrase was originally coined in 1978 by two psychologists, Dr. Suzanne Imes and Dr. Pauline Clance. They research on high achieving academic women, and what they found was these women were obviously highly accomplished, were doing extremely well in their careers, but they didn't believe in their success, they didn't believe in themselves. And they found that these women would be saying things like, I'm going to get found out, I'm a fraud, I've been through some kind of deception, it's pure luck that got me here. And this is then what was the catalyst for their work over the years. Although their original research was around women, further research has been done, as I mentioned, to say that actually up to 70% of us will struggle with this at some point in our lives, and it isn't just women that struggle with it. It sometimes seems that way because I think women are sometimes more open about their emotions, what they're going through than men, but it is something that that can happen to anybody. It's not a psychological condition. If it was looking at that psychological spectrum, it falls into normal functioning, so you don't necessarily need to see psychotherapists for this, but it is that kind of shared experience. It isn't, again, if we're thinking of that continuum, not at the psychologist end of things, in normal functioning, but it's not in prime functioning. It's not necessarily where we want to be. And this is where coaching can maybe bridge that gap. And as I said, what we often find is people that are struggling with this on some level know that they are good enough. They just don't feel that they're good enough. And that's what that gap is. And it's then realigning that to help them get that real inner confidence to actually feel. This imposter syndrome can ebb and flow over time. So in my own situation, it's that 3 to 6 month learning curve. It can change for everybody. You can also feel it in one aspect of your life and not another. So it's not like you necessarily feel like an imposter in everything you're doing. An example could even be, you know, you've got a CEO. They are very comfortable giving presentations to their whole company. It could be thousands of people, but when they have to give a presentation to the board, they may feel like an imposter. So it can be really specific sometimes in terms of where these feelings show up and how they show up for them.
So it's like individual thing. So it works for different person in a different way. Sometimes like they're fine with the thousands of people, but sometimes it's 10 people and they're not comfortable dealing with the situation. So do you think it's like a confidence issue, or?
I think there is, it can get confused, I suppose, with confidence issues within that. And I know that often we work with people around confidence. I think it is also more around that inner self-worth and that unconditional self-worth. So often what we do is we say, I'm worthy if I do X, Y, and Z. So I'm worthy of doing this job if I do that. And unconditional self-worth is kind of almost taking away your actions from you as an individual, so that actually it doesn't matter what you do, you still love, respect, and have inner confidence in yourself. I think that's what we need to work on when we're working with imposter syndrome.
Right. So in terms of like when you experienced it, like you mentioned, am I worthy of this job? Am I going to be able to climb the ladder? Or like, am I getting any growth? Or am I going to lose the job? So what was the main issue like you having when you're going through the situation? Is it lack of confidence or self-belief? What was it actually?
So I think it's that self-belief. I think it's, and this has come after my own training on this, I didn't acknowledge at the time that inner critic, that self-talk that we've all got all of the time that's going on in our minds. And I hadn't tuned into that. But when you're not tuning into it, you're just accepting what's going on. I use the example, when I did start to tune into it, one day I caught myself, I dropped a pen, and in my head, I said to myself, you are so stupid. And it was said with such venom. And once I tuned into that, I was like, okay, am I stupid or am I just a little bit clumsy? Is this actually true? And then if you think about, you know, we know words have power, beliefs, things like that. So actually, if you are saying things like that to yourself all day, every day, and you're not checking in on it, and you're not even aware that this is happening, because I wasn't aware. And once I tuned into it, I realized how many times a day I said to myself, you're so stupid, or you're an idiot. Like, what do you, if somebody else was saying that to you, you can imagine what the effect is. Imagine the effect if you're doing it to yourself, you are your own bully. So that was kind of, I think once I started to tune into that, or if I could have tuned into that at the time, I think I could have then challenged maybe what those thoughts were to then, and a simple question might be, is that true? So in case, you know, the example of dropping a pen, just asking, is that true? Am I stupid because I dropped a pen? Made me reframe it to maybe I'm a little bit clumsy. Or I think nothing at all. And I think that would have been that would have helped. But I think all of that self-talk then led to those feelings because they were unchecked.
So it's all about thinking on your head, like what we talk about all the time. So sometimes it's
Yes.
negative thoughts, sometimes uncertainty about the future, and also the past experiences like making us like that kind of situation. And I can totally relate to when I started my business. I felt like a stupid because I quit my job and everything, and just gone all in and just about to get bankrupt. Sometimes I feel like, am I stupid? Am I that? I don't, because I'm not meeting my potential, and also like quitting my job at the same time and going after something like we have no experience in. I don't know it's going to be work or not. So yeah, I can relate to that. Like you mentioned, like, am I going to lose this job? Am I going to be able to climb the ladder of it? But same can apply on a business wise as well. So I didn't know what am I doing. So every time I feel like I'm being stupid, I didn't make the right decision I needed to be. So yeah, I think it overcomes like with the time. Do you think it takes time? Like you need to calm your mind, and it's a mindset needs to be changed, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it is exactly that. It's starting to understand what you're doing to yourself, and then having the strategy to have a different thought process or something that you can refer to that reminds you why you're doing something in the first place, why you're good at doing that thing, because there's reasons that you've got to this point, and it's reminding yourself of that to counteract some of that negativity that maybe you're feeling.
Yeah. And so like if someone is like having this problem, what will be like first step to get out of it? So obviously you coach your clients, so what's the first thing they need to take, or like you tell them to do something? What would be the first thing?
Yeah, so I think it obviously depends on the individuals. I think first of all is maybe really exploring what is happening because of the imposter syndrome. How is it showing up for you? What's it maybe holding you back on, so you start to really get a full extent to how big a problem this might be. And also, are there patterns? As I mentioned, it ebbs and flows over time. So you might be feeling it now, but actually, if we look back, has it happened previously? And if it's happened previously, you've overcome it. So actually, are there strategies that you've already had that have worked that we can use in this situation? Because often when we overcome something, we forget. We move on so quickly, we forget what we did, and we don't reflect on it. So initially it's that kind of exploration around what's happening, how it's showing up for you, because it is, like we said, it's different for everybody. There's different triggers, how we've got to this point, and then setting out that road plan for how we move forward. Then what I generally do is then we work a bit around self-awareness. So personally, I use a psychometric test called Everything Disc with people to promote that conversation. But it's just talking around really how you communicate with people, what triggers you, what stresses you, what motivates you, what gives you energy. Because I think once we start to really understand ourselves, it comes back to that unconditional worth. Actually, who am I? Why am I here? Why am I showing up every day? And the fact that your job isn't necessarily you. It's part of what you do, but it's not necessarily who you are. And they're starting to see where those differences are. We then maybe do some work around values. What's important to you? What do you value in yourself, in other people, in your family, in your life? And then almost that assessment piece about how is your life aligned to that at the moment? Because sometimes we feel like an imposter because the things that really bring us joy are not the things that we're doing on a regular basis. So actually, how do we get that balance back? How do we bring that back? Or how do we change our mindset so a task that we're doing, we can see in a different light that does align to our values within that. And then as we're kind of going through this process, we do reframing of thoughts. I do a lot around positive mental attitude. I'm a really big believer at that, a bit like, because I tuned into my own thoughts and I know how they impacted me in a negative way. The opposite, obviously, if you have positive thoughts and you're looking for the positives and you're grateful and you are doing, you know, 3 gratitudes a day, whatever that is, I think that really does start to tune your mind in to seeing those positives. I mean, I don't know why we're made up the way we are. We've got a negativity bias where it's natural for us to see the negative and positives. We have to work harder generally to see the positives. But again, knowledge is power. So if we know that, we can put in place, and I work with people to say, okay, what would work for you? Is it waking up in the morning and you're still in bed thinking about something you're grateful for? Is it at the end of the day thinking about journaling those 3 things that you're grateful for? As you know, what I do is when I'm in the car, and obviously we can get out a bit more now, and driving, if a traffic light is green, I always say thank you, because that's my gratitude. Yes, because, and it's small, but it's when you notice these things, notice more and more of these things, and I think that builds that resilience in, again, that unconditional.
All small things adds up, isn't it? So eventually that builds up.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also within that positive mental attitude, one thing I would, and it's maybe something your listeners would like to do, is to actually start writing down all of your achievements. And when I talk about achievements, I'm not necessarily just thinking about the big things in life, about, you know, a degree or a job promotion and things, but what can you do today that one day you didn't know how to do? Everything we can do, because with everything there's a learning curve. And I take the example of, you know, driving. When you first get into a car, it seems impossible, you know, your hands, you know, what you're meant to do, it feels overwhelming. Once you've passed your test and you've been driving for a bit, if somebody asks you how to drive, it's really difficult to even tell them. So at a point we go from something that seems impossible to something we do so automatically, and we don't think about it. It's not like one day, oh, I can do this. It just happens. And that is the case with pretty much everything we do, you know, walking, using a computer. And so I encourage people to write these things down, write down the things, because when you next face into a challenge, which is doing something new and different, yes, it's going to be different, but then you've got all of your own evidence of all the things you've done previously, all the things you've overcome, and also that reminder that all these things take time. As adults, we're really bad at this learning process. We kind of think we go from A to Z in 100 miles an hour. And again, it's maybe thinking about, and the reframe is around, think about a baby. When they're learning to walk, how many times do they try and they fall over? We don't let them do it 10 times and then go, you can stop. You're not going to be a walker, you're going to crawl for your whole life. They just keep going, they learn, and that is the best example of that growth mindset of, I'm just going to keep going until I get it. And we've lost that. We don't think like that. We kind of almost use it to reaffirm our imposter syndrome of, if I was good, I'd just be able to do it. But you've never done it before, why should you just be able to do it? And I think that reframe around everything takes time, and we need to be kinder with ourselves, is a really important one.
It's just a process. It's just a one day at a time and keep moving forward, isn't it?
Exactly.
And I can relate to like you mentioned, write down all of the achievement you had in your past. And that's actually really happened with my life. Like I mentioned, when I felt like a failure and everything, felt like I'm stupid. Then I went back and thinking like how much I achieved so far in the last 5 years or even 10 years. Because I'm originally from Bangladesh. So I moved when I was 16 years old. So if you heard me when I was 16, everyone making a joke out of me because of my accent and everything, the word I was saying, and I wouldn't understand none of the English British accent compared to Bangladesh one. So when I was like 5 years back, when I think about the business wasn't going well and things like that, I felt like a failure again. But when I look back, Like, no, I did well on my graduation. I graduated coming from like a background I have, and I become a school teacher. So small achievement like that. And then right now, what am I actually doing? It's comparing to not similar level to in 5 years or 10 years ahead of the time. But in the past, I can relate to that small achievement is all adds up. And that gives like a boost. Like, look at me, how much I came from the past experiences, what I learned, and the achievement I had. So even the small thing, like even those sports, if you trying or even though like losing weight, for an example, small diet achievement you had like from 65 kg to gone like a 61, a 4 kg loss, that could be like a great achievement for yourself. And take it as a career and life, I think is a great way to look at it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And as you said, I think
Yeah.
and even when you're going for those bigger goals, and so if you use weight loss as the example, you know, it might be that you've got a bigger amount of weight you want to lose, but actually if you celebrate every bit along the way, it's chunking everything down into those smaller steps so that you can see that progress. Because sometimes, again, if we've got those really big goals, just is so out of reach, and it's going to take such a long time to achieve it that we lose motivation and momentum. We don't think we're making progress. Whereas if we've made smaller steps, we can see that progress that we're making, and we can enjoy the journey. And it's very cliched, but it isn't that, you know, that end destination is important. But why wait to be happy or to feel confident or whatever it is until that point? You can feel those things now, and as you make the progress towards that end goal as well.
Yeah, it's like having a big goal, which is great. So you have to have like your vision 5 years, 10 years, but obviously the future doesn't promise. Like, look at last year's coronavirus came and everything's everywhere. But you have to have a direction. It's like setting up your sat nav. So you know where to go, like from London to Manchester, you have to have the idea where am I heading to. But there is no like a time frame. Probably it's like 4 hours drive or 3.5 hours, but you don't know could be an accident on the motorway, or could be like a traffic or roadworks is going on, then the journey could be 6 hours or 10 hours, depends. But what you can do is like have the sat nav, you know where you're going, and keep moving forward. And same with, again, with the goal achievement or doing something small, like you mentioned. Look at the past, like last 12 years, how much you came from the year before. Even though it's like a 10% growth or 20% growth, celebrate yourself like you did something compared to the year before that. Could be you can do 50% next year, or could be the 100% achieve your goal. So nothing is impossible, but actually achieving it rather than say, oh no, I'm supposed to lose 25 pounds, but I only lost 5. At least you lost 5, you know. So take that.
And it's I think it was Tony Robbins that said, you know, if you could change by 1% every day, in just over 3 months, you're 100% different to where you are today.
It's a small thing counts. It does. Every little drops work. So like, what do you see like when working with your clients? How long does it actually take for changing their mindset to like creating themselves like a new version of themselves? So how long the process? Obviously, individual will be different, but what's your average?
Okay, so I actually normally work with like an 8-week program. So people prefer to do things fortnightly, but within a couple of months, you can see significant changes in accepting yourself, understanding what your value is, being able to show up, and doing that homework in between. So it's identifying the actions, whether it's actually physically doing. So for example, you don't like giving presentations, or you feel like an imposter doing that kind of element. It might be what's that small step you can take, and you build up over that time. Often it is mindset. It's understanding what's that when you catch yourself thinking that, what are you going to think or do, or how are you going to behave differently as a result? Because as we know, often a lot of these things happen because they have become habits, and at some point they've served us because that's how they've become a habit, they're no longer serving us. We need to create new habits, new ways of being, and that takes time. That takes that consistent action to make sure we don't fall backwards into our old habits. And that's where that kind of weekly coaching, for example, it kind of helps keep you accountable, because if you do happen to slip back, we can explore that, and we can also celebrate those successes along the way, and keeping you on to get to your own goal.
Yeah. So like what difference do you see like after going through like let's say a couple of months or 3 months working with you, they change their mindset? Do they feel more confident? Do they feel like achievement on their career or something? What is success like?
So I think success generally, again, is different depending on the individuals. There are things that have been reported, and then it may be in testimonials and things, are people feel like themselves again. So often it is when we feel like an imposter, we might think, well, this is how I am, and we kind of forget that we used to not feel this way. So people can start to feel genuine about themselves. They feel that they're showing up in an authentic way, that they're reconnected with actually who they are, what their purpose is. As an individual, there's an increase in self-awareness. So is that tuning into that inner voice? It's aligning your life around your values. It's really starting to think, actually create your life, and actually how you want to be and how you want to show up, and putting some conscious thought behind it. Because and it's not a criticism, but many of us, we just get pulled along in the current of life, and we're taking that step back and thinking, is this actually what I want, or actually is there something else? Is there a different way to view this situation, a different perspective within this? And as you mentioned, that confidence thing, so I suppose the biggest change is the fact that by the end they don't have those feelings of being a fraud or being found out, that they are showing up fully in the careers that they love, that they're great at. And if that gap between knowing that they can do the job and feeling that they can do the job narrowed, and they feel that they can do what they need to do.
Success for everyone will be different. So what do you think, like, is it they need their partner, or like anyone need to support them in terms of like going through that change, or they just be fine with themselves to make the changes?
I think often it is a very personal thing. So I think it is about empowering the individual to make the changes. I think having a support network can be very helpful, but it's not compulsory within this. So if you've got somebody that can maybe reflect back some of your achievements and is your cheerleader, that can obviously help that reinforcement at times. Equally though, sometimes actually having people doing that, depending on how you're experiencing imposter syndrome, can actually be detrimental. Because if, for example, you are labelled as, a natural genius at something, if you've internalized that label, anytime that you feel that you are not living up to that, it can intensify those feelings. So sometimes people giving you praise can actually intensify your feelings. And again, it's not a criticism, it's not a judgment on people. We all say and do things, but it's how that's received by somebody. So in some ways, having somebody that's very supportive, depending on your imposter syndrome triggers, may actually, as I said, intensify those feelings.
So like for our audience, what would you like to say to them? Like if anyone's going through the same syndrome, imposter syndrome, how they can start making changes in their life?
So I think a few things. I think the first thing is to remember that you're not alone. Remember the statistics that 70% of us, that's 7 out of 10 people, if this is the first time that you're hearing about it, if you just think about your circle of friends or your family or your colleagues, that means potentially 7 out of 10 of them that maybe you're identifying as feeling at the moment, and you have no idea, because what you see is them being great at what they do. This is that gap between what you do and how you feel. So actually nobody knows you, this is how you're feeling, because you are great at what you do. It is just that feeling. So I think it is remembering that this is quite a shared experience in the first place. I would really encourage people to keep that log of their achievements, having that something to refer back to, something you keep adding to. The actual process of writing it is great in itself. It can feel a bit uncomfortable to begin with, but it also, as I said, is something for you to refer back to, and to start to identify patterns and things for yourself about, actually, I can see that it takes me X amount of time to learn something, or in this particular area I feel more uncomfortable in this area. So it's that self-awareness coming through. And I think the final bit of advice I would give to somebody would be, think about a situation, if you are struggling with these feelings of where you know you wouldn't feel like an imposter, and then back to what we were saying, create that plan. So it's not just about that Pollyanna thinking. As we know, I do think positive mindset's really important. But there may be some genuine gaps in your knowledge or your skills, but often it is mindset. So this is where maybe working with a mentor, a manager, trusted friend, a coach is useful for them to kind of sense check you of, do you really need that qualification, or is it just your mindset shift that you need, for example, on that? But once you've got that plan of, okay, I'm here, I want to get to here I know I won't feel like an imposter, you either work forward or work back, depending how you create your plans, and put those steps in place. But make them small, make them a stretch so you feel good when you achieve them, but don't make, it's not about going from there to there, it is about what are those small steps in between, and celebrate those successes along the way. Maybe add them into your success journal as you're going, because it builds that confidence, because confidence comes from taking action. And we often have this, I'll do that when I feel confident, but we won't, again, if we use driving a car as the analogy, if we think, I won't learn to drive until I feel confident driving, none of us would ever do it. We only build that confidence by doing the actions and correcting and going. And it's exactly the same in anything we do in life. We have to take the actions, we have to get uncomfortable and start to find a way of, what are those small steps that we're almost comfortable being uncomfortable in, and move forward from there. And I think once you start doing that and you are taking those actions, you push through, and then you will achieve what you want to achieve.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you so much for that. So we are running out of our time for this podcast. So if anyone wants to work with you or reach out to you, get some advice from you, how they can reach out? Do you have a website, social media? Where will the best option?
I do. So I have a website. It's www.lindseyhood.net. I am also on social media, on Facebook and Instagram under the handle @Lindsey Hood Life Coach.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Lindsey, for coming to our show and sharing your knowledge and expertise on the subject we talked about. And I wish you good luck with your life and your career. And thanks for being here.
Thank you ever so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you. So this is a wrap, guys. Thank you so much for listening to our episode. So till then, I'll see you in the next episode. So stay safe, stay healthy. Talk to you soon. Take care.